teacher seeks pupil, must have an earnest desire to save the world, apply in person. So begins the novel Ishmael, published in 1992 by Daniel Quinn, now residing in Houston. Through the course of more than a dozen books and countless speeches and essays, Daniel Quinn has served as a strong and poetic guide for the human journey. Whether speaking in the voice of a talking gorilla, an itinerant teacher, or one of our animist forebears, Quinn's love for the earth and his concern for the future of life on this planet are palpable and clear. I must admit the task of figuring out what to say about Daniel Quinn and his work kicked my butt. My attempts to summarize his ideas, and I made more than one, ended up dense and lifeless. And rendering Quinn's work lifeless is the last thing I would want to do. When I read Ishmael's stories, my heart pounds. My eyes mist with tears. It's as if I'm sitting in the presence of the whole of the community of life condensed into a single gorilla. He speaks to me firmly, yet lovingly, of my long and destructive journey into disconnection and domination, of my bad behavior and mistaken ideas, and he invites me to come back home, and I follow where he leads me. When I read of the words of the teacher in the story of B, I'm listening to a missionary from the living world, a speaker of such clarity, such wisdom, and such commitment that my heart and mind break wide open. The normally unseen stories and assumptions of our culture and our history come to life before my eyes like an epic poem or a grand piece of theater, and I can see what is all around me with new eyes. Daniel Quinn's greatest genius, I think, was to put his insights into the mouths of characters that I could love. Because I loved them, I could open up to what they were saying, even when what they were saying was new and strange and unbelievable. I have no wish to take such magic and render it dense and lifeless. And yet Daniel Quinn's ideas could inform us here this weekend, and as I cannot read to you out loud a dozen of his novels in 18 minutes, I shall simply have to do my best to see to the heart of his insights without killing them. Aaron wished to speak of this vision this weekend, and Daniel Quinn certainly has something to offer in that regard. Ultimately, I think all of his work boils down to matters of vision and culture and paradigm, words which I will use rather interchangeably here to speak of the web of assumptions, beliefs, values, expectations, and stories upon which our society is founded. Quinn speaks explicitly of vision in the story of B in Beyond Civilization, where he writes, quote, "If the world is saved, it will not be saved by old minds with new programs, but by new minds with no programs at all." Let me repeat that. If the world is saved, it will not be saved by old minds with new programs, but by new minds with no programs at all. In order to tease that apart, I shall have to go back and grab and briefly sum up a select few of his many ideas and observations in order to set the foundation. I will have to trust that this will be enough. In Quinn's view, to save the world does not mean to save our current cultural system, a goal which he regards as both impossible and undesirable. Instead, to save the world means, quote, to save the world as a human habitat, which means, quote, saving the world as a habitat for as many other species as possible. To that end, Quinn works to uncover the deep roots of the confluence of crises we now face. He focuses on matters of vision and outlines how our present world-spanning cultural system has been enacting a story that tells us that the world was made for us human beings to conquer and rule as we see fit, using our power to control the world around us, to take both our survival and our destiny into our own hands. He explores the origins of this urge to rule the world, how it rose out of our culture's invention of a new style of food production that claims the Earth's productive capacity for human consumption at the expense of all other species. He traces how the food surpluses of this style of agriculture led to an increasing power to shape the world around us, and to the exponential rise of human population levels. These in turn fueled the steady rise of a myriad of environmental and social problems, bringing us to the point where many now claim that we are living inside of the planet's sixth great mass extinction event, and foresee the possibility that this event may include the extinction of humanity itself. As this impulse to conquer and rule spread around the planet, we began to think that our culture was the whole of humanity, rather than just one culture amongst many. We took our power to control as sure evidence that the world had been given to us to dominate and tame, and that our way of life was the one right way. Even as the side effects of trying to rule the world became clear, as war, disease, pollution, and a host of social ills appeared on the stages of history, even as we began to imagine that there was something fundamentally wrong with us, we saw little else to do but continue on this path. If taking control of the world was not working, it was because we hadn't yet taken control of everything. The only way forward was to do even more of what we'd been doing. But Daniel Quinn has good news. Modern scholarship, he says, allows us to see that we of this culture are not humanity, but just one culture out of many on this earth. We now know that humans lived on this planet for hundreds of thousands of years without bringing the world to the point of mass extinction, which means that humans are fully capable of living in balance with the rest of the community of life. We can see that our ancestors and the few remnants of these ancient cultures still alive today enacted a very different vision from our own. If the story of our culture is that the world was made for and belongs to human beings, the other story is this: human beings were made for and belong to the world. If the intent of our vision is to rule the world, the intent of the other vision is this: to live in a dynamic, creative conversation with the rest of reality, trusting that the world has no need for humans to either conquer or rule it. We can see then that it is primarily a culture, a vision, a set of stories and beliefs and assumptions that is taking us toward catastrophe. If we are the inherently greedy, destructive, violent creatures many think we are, there is no hope for us. If we are instead wonderful creatures who are simply trapped inside a greedy, destructive, and violent culture, and if such a story can be changed, then we have a chance. This is the good news. With this foundation in place, let me return to Daniel Quinn's thoughts on vision. If the world is saved, it will not be saved by old minds with new programs, but by new minds with no programs at all. Quinn likens a culture's defining vision or story to a river, and observes that our culture's river of vision, our dream of ruling the world, is carrying us toward catastrophe and always has been, as our lifestyle has us grow and consume at the expense of all other species and makes of us the enemies of life. Programs, Quinn says, are like sticks planted in the river of vision in an attempt to stop it, as we can clearly now see the catastrophe toward which this river is taking us. But the sticks succeed only in slowing the flow a little. Programs are essentially reactive and focus on making bad things less bad rather than creating new things. Programs, these ineffective sticks, are invented by what Quinn calls old minds, minds that are bound by the limits of the current dominant vision. When you find programs, you find old minds thinking inside the current river of vision and trying to impede its flow. But programs never stop what they are intended to stop. Programs, says Quinn, make it possible to look busy and purposeful while failing. We've now had centuries of programs, millennia of programs. If programs did what we expect them to do, human society would already be heaven on earth. Government, education, economy, law, these systems would already work for the greatest good of all. If the world is saved then, it will not be saved by people who remain stuck in the vision of ruling the world, and who, in an attempt to stop the effects of that vision, simply invent new ways to exert even more power and control. A river taking us a bit more slowly toward catastrophe is still taking us to catastrophe. We now have centuries of data to show us the truth of this. If the current river of vision is taking us to catastrophe, and if old minds and their programs will never suffice to stop this river, then what will suffice? The answer, says Quinn, is this: a new vision held by new minds. Rather than try to stop the current river, what we must do is divert the river to a new vision, a new way of being on this planet, a new story of who we are and why we are here. A new river of vision will need no programs to carry it along. Programs are about stopping a vision. A new vision will be self-spreading and self-sustaining. Vision is to culture what gravity is to matter, says Quinn. It is the force that pulls us now toward catastrophe. It is the force that can pull us back to a sane and sustainable human life on planet Earth. If we wish to be free of the river that is dragging us toward catastrophe, we will have to find a new vision. Notice that Quinn's words echo those of Albert Einstein when he said, quote, "We can't solve problems by using the same kind of thinking we use to create them." Einstein was also speaking of new minds and new visions, though even he himself was trapped in the cultural programming, since in some very real ways, the paradigm of problem solving is the level of thinking that has created our present predicament. Approaching every situation as a problem to be solved is what conquerors and rulers of the world do, after all. And many now see that most of the problems we now face stem from previous solutions to earlier problems. It may be fair to say that problem solving, as it is understood in our culture, is largely a matter of placing sticks in the river. Notice also that the defining cultural visions Quinn outlines of ruling the world or of belonging to the world are deeply foundational in nature. These are not visions about how we might reorganize our urban areas or how else we might grow our food or what sort of decision-making process we will use in our meetings, though these may all be worthwhile discussions in which to engage. The stories Quinn reveals are stories about who we are, where we came from, why we are here, and where we are headed. These are visions about what it all means, our place in the universe, and how we relate to the rest of creation, what Thomas Berry would call cosmologies. These stories are primary and fundamental, and they determine the basic direction of the river of vision which carries us along. Such defining visions shape all of our other visions. We can grow food as a ruler of the world or as a member of the community of life. We can organize politically to conquer the world or to live in harmony with the rest of creation. In the end, it boils down to why we are here, and if we have no clarity on that point, nothing else will be clear. Know that Quinn made clear that both of these visions arose out of long periods of experience. The first members of our dominant global culture did not one day to decide and conquer and rule the world and then invent a new style of agriculture to achieve that end. At some point, the practitioners of this new style of agriculture noticed the great power to control that this lifestyle gave them and began to fancy themselves the rulers of the world. In a like manner, the vision of being made for the world grew out of long millennia of a lifestyle that kept people in intimate balance with the community of life around them, and which gave those who enacted that vision largely happy and fulfilling lives. In both cases, the thing to notice is that these visions arose out of long periods of experience. Contrast that with our situation now, a time of such urgency that it seems we must invent and wordcraft a new vision, type it up, post it, forward it, link it, frame it, brand it, explain it, and get it out there, with bulleted talking points and a neat three-color logo, ASAP, or we're all going to die. And we have to do this all knowing in the back of our minds that it may be too late in any event, that it may never work, and that we may have no future in which this new vision can manifest. We who live today have a unique and seemingly impossible task, like none who preceded us. These are truly unprecedented times. Know also that in Quinn's view, no paradigm is ever able to imagine the next one. In fact, it's almost impossible for one paradigm to imagine that there will even be a next one. He says that, quote, "For all our blather of new paradigms and emerging paradigms, it's an unassailable assumption among us that our distant descendants will be just exactly like us. Their gadgets, fashion, music, and so on will surely be different, but we're confident that their mindset will be identical because we can imagine no other mindset for people to have." End of quote. Using Richard Dawkins' concept of the meme, which he calls, quote, "the conceptual building plans for our culture," and of which he says, "memes are to cultures what genes are to bodies." Daniel Quinn answers the question, how can we achieve a vision we can't imagine? This way, one meme at a time. And know finally that in Quinn's view, this matter of finding a new vision is not a matter of ease or difficulty. As Quinn said in the story of B, quote, "The relevant measures are not ease and difficulty. The relevant measures are readiness and unreadiness. If the time isn't right for a new idea, no power on earth can make it catch on. But if the time is right, it will sweep the world like wildfire." For myself, the experience of reading Quinn's work is summed up by one of his own characters who said of the teacher, Charles Adderley, in the story of B, quote, "Everything Adderley was saying was obvious, and all of it was new." Quinn made conscious for me the cultural stories that surround us, the stories in which I was raised, the stories that masqueraded as just the way things are. Cultural stories are to humans like water is to fish. We swim in these stories without even knowing that we're swimming in anything. But once somebody points out the water, we realize that we know it intimately, as we've been swimming in it our whole lives. And Daniel Quinn points out the water. And once we see the water, it becomes difficult to not see it. And once we see the water, the stories, the culture, we may be gifted instantly with the ability to swim consciously. In swimming consciously, we can begin to swim away from the default stories that are taking us to catastrophe, and to imagine new stories, a new vision that might take us toward life. Daniel Quinn gives us new tools with which to respond to our collective predicament. His simple, moving prose touches me deeply each time I read it, and I have read it again and again. I see the water quite clearly now. I can't not see it, and I shall be forever indebted to Daniel Quinn for that. The notion that a culture is a set of stories we tell ourselves, that these stories shape our lives in the physical realm, and that we can question and change these stories, has impacted every layer of my life, from my relationship to Sally to my work in the world. I question everything I can now, every aspect of the culture in which I was born and raised. In questioning it, I have found a measure of freedom apart from it. When I speak to you again, I will tell you more of that freedom. Until then, I will leave you with this question to ponder, if you will, a question that might open up new avenues of thinking for you. How are you still trying to rule the world? Thank you.